Well, everybody, welcome to Harvest at the Anarchist Wine Co. We're here in Napa Valley, California. For those of you that do not know us or have not been introduced to us, we are a family-owned winery up here in Napa Valley, and we make Anarchist Wine Co. wines and Foundry wines. A quick note, this is October 1st, turn of a new month here, and even though this is going to be recorded, we'll go ahead and mark it with a little bit of a permanent timestamp, and the fact that the fires are here in Napa. There's a very large fire called the Glass Fire that's affecting a lot of people. From our wine standpoint, we're extremely fortunate that all of our fruit was picked before that started. There's no threat of smoke taint on those wines, and we're extremely fortunate for that. But we're a very small community here in Napa, and it's a very trying time for a number of people. A few of our cellar workers are displaced and have been evacuated, and a few other employees, and obviously a ton of friends and colleagues. So it's a difficult time. And for those interested in supporting or donating to the cause, you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram. In our stories, we're constantly posting. Teresa's constantly posting how you can donate and give back. And then really for any winery in Napa or Sonoma, the best way to do it is to buy their wine. That's what keeps us all afloat. So doesn't have to be our wine, though we do love it and we appreciate it. But since you can't come here to visit, buy the wines of your favorite winery, and that goes a long way to support the community here in both Napa and Sonoma. So as Stu mentioned in the preamble, open your bottles, whether you have the Anarchist and the Philosopher or you have something else, open it up, get comfortable. And we're going to dive into Harvest a little bit here. So Stu, a toast to you, my friend. Cheers. Who's on my left?
Cheers, Steve Ryan.
Go ahead.
Steve and I are armed with the 2018 Anarchist, the bottle that's perched over his shoulder. The Anarchist is the name, obviously the namesake of the brand. The 2018, if you're tasting at home, is built around 6 different varietals, different grape types, including a grape called Gewürztraminer, Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, Sauvignon Blanc, another grape called Viognier, and Chardonnay. There's a whole lot of shaking going on. When we started in 2018, or for this vintage in particular, we fermented each of those grapes separately. And then through trial and error with Patrick at the blending table, we shaped the aromas, we shaped the flavors, and the structure of the wine to get what you have in glass in front of you. So what we're going to be doing tonight is kind of looking at the current vintage or aspects of the current vintage to try to extrapolate like how we got these flavors in this glass by looking at what's taking place in the winery tonight. So we're going to do the same thing with 2020. We're fermenting everything separately, and then we'll blend it together in February, March, when we assemble these wines. Steve is over at the Gewürztraminer tank. He's perched over there, and the wine is just finishing up. The 2020 interpretation is just finishing up primary fermentation. Steve, you got it?
And you can unmute. Thank you, Stu, very much. It's a working winery, and we are in harvest, and so you may see some of our fantastic winery crew that are moving things all about. So we're going to go ahead and taste the Gewürztraminer. So as Stu mentioned, it's the base of the Anarchist, and in the 2018 is 50% of the Anarchist, and it's really what contributes a very kind of floral and I'd say almost tropical, Stu, is that fair? Note to the aromatics. So if you have it in your glass, swirl it around, take that in. The 2019 that has not been released, we just bottled it recently. It's going to age in bottle for a little bit, and then we'll release it. But that actually has 55% Gewürztraminer. So the wine is structured around that. And most people know Gewürztraminer as a sweet wine. It's an Alsatian varietal. It's it's grown in Germany quite a bit as well, and people usually do it as a dessert wine or a sweeter wine. So we're going ahead and making it dry. Not totally unheard of by any means, but a little bit against the norm. And that's our foundational piece, because we think that it really kicks the aromatics into gear. So we're going to go ahead and try the 2020 that's in tank. This is Stu. I'm sorry if I missed it when you said that. Do you know the bricks on this morning? I think you're on mute.
Steve, why don't you taste it, and I think you'll be able to figure out where it is.
I can probably guess it. Okay.
You can probably guess it. I'm actually I'm gonna quiz you.
All right, perfect.
It's pretty close.
For those of you that saw what I did, I sprayed alcohol in it's called a sample cock, and or a sample valve is another term for it. But you spray alcohol inside of it just to make sure that you try not to get any microbes into the wine. So here, I'm going to go ahead and try this. Extremely, extremely aromatic. Wow, this is great. And this is a new source of Gewürztraminer this year. So we actually could not get enough Gewürztraminer for the Anarchist project. And so instead of supplementing with another vineyard, we took the whole base of the wine to a new vineyard, which I think I'm really excited about it. It's up in Anderson Valley. It's actually literally called Hell of a Vineyard. HELLUVA. You can look it up. It's a great place. All right, Stu. So it's under 1 Brix. So the Brix is a measurement of sugar remaining in the wine. It's under 1 Brix for sure. It's probably we go to a dry wine, as our wines are. We'll go down to -1.5, -2. So it's very, very close. And yeah,
ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna ring the bell for Steve Ryan. Is 0.8 Brix. So congratulations, Steve.
Did I get it right?
You're
Awesome.
You're right there, man. You're right there. Fantastic. So, but Steve has the wine that is finishing up fermentation. So we were talking about that scale where we measure the density, the sugar density, in effect, the Brix scale. But 2 weeks ago, those grapes were still on vine. And when we pick the grapes for the Gewürztraminer, or when we pick the grapes for any of the white components or rosé against the machine, we harvest them by hand, which Steve will talk about shortly. And then we're going to pop them directly here in the press. So I'm standing, right in front of the press. And what we're going to do is when those grapes come in, we're going to squeeze them. But but for red wine, it's a little bit different. So I'm going to kind of go over here by the sorting table. And Sharaf, can you launch the video for the sorting table? So the video for the sort, here's what happens. What you're going to see is the grapes are pulled off in clusters, and they are dumped into the hopper. And once they go into the hopper, you're going to see Benito kind of raking the grapes, and there we're sorting the individual clusters. And we'll have usually a couple of people on either side of the table reviewing those clusters. And then what's going to happen is they're going to start climbing up this new incline ladder that we have, where they're going to go into the crusher destemmer. And what's really cool in there is that it kind of shakes the berries off very, very gently with these teeny little fingers without breaking the skin. And then those grapes are going to go on to where they're sorted individually on the sorting table. And we sort the individual berries. And the last part of that sorting thing is something I like to brag about. It's the Optical Sorter. And Steve was instrumental in getting us the optical sorter in 2015 when we ran trials on it. And then, Steve, can I kind of toss it over to you, and can you kind of talk to us about the optical sorter?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, are we on? Good. Yes, the optical sorter. So first of all, the destemmer, as Stu was alluding to, that I couldn't quite get in there because there's a key that we have to it, and our production manager keeps it very close to his vest. So I can't open it up all the way. But basically inside, there's a series of rollers that oscillate the grapes while they're on the clusters, and then they drop them down. The grapes will fall through these other rollers and then come down onto the shaker table. So here on the shaker table, it's going to when it's operating, it vibrates quite a bit. And you may have seen in the video. And it vibrates through to get it onto one layer, and also to shake out any raisins or any sort of pre-sort stuff. And then it comes over to the optical sorter. So the optical sorter is a decision that we made. It's actually kind of interesting because the technology has been available for decades. They use it in corn, frozen peas, frozen corn, blueberries, all of these different food applications. But the wine industry is very much traditional, and they kind of do things a certain way for a long time. And finally, in about 2014 or so, higher end wineries started looking into the technology. Maybe 2013 started looking into the technology, and you can use the same exact equipment. So in 2015, we bought our optical sorter, and basically what it is that this conveyor sends the grapes through, and you have a series of cameras. There are 4 cameras here that are looking for pre-programmed parameters of size, shape, and color. And that's what's in this computer that is, wrapped up in plastic so it doesn't get wet. And it basically watches each berry. And whenever there's something that is not in the parameters that are acceptable to the winemaker, it sends a hydraulic jet that just shoots it right out. And so there's 64 jets here, basically one every half inch. And it will literally just kind of target that berry and shoot it right out, drop it out on this side down here, while the good berries go on the other side. So people often ask that maybe it's probably about 0.5%. When we harvest, we hand harvest. And so a lot of the material other than grapes are omitted in the harvesting process, as opposed to having machines pick it, where you get a lot more junk. But it's probably, I'd say it's got to be less than 1% that we lose in this. And the benefit to the winery is quality, and then it allows our labor to focus on other things in the winery that need to be done. So it actually is not like a labor saver. We're not gonna cut labor because of it, but it does save the company money to be able to, we're not gonna pay as much overtime basically, because the days are a little bit shorter, people are less tired, it's safer, so it's a good way to do it. So I think the next stage of the game is the press. And Stu, you're separated by a tank here. I can't see it, but are you over by the press?
Yeah, Steve, I am over by the press. The one thing I was thinking about when you talked about hand harvesting, did I miss it? Did we go over harvesting?
No, I think we blew right through harvesting.
So yeah, actually, you know what? I think it might be fine to kind of, we're gonna do the Wayback Machine right now. So what I need everyone at home to do is raise a glass, close your eyes, and then we're just going to talk backwards for, and now Sharath, what I would hope you'd do is before we brought those grapes in and sorted them, Steve, Philip, Teresa, Jenny, and I, we caravanned up to a vineyard to actually, the grapes that got just before they were sorted, we actually picked them. And then, and Sharath, you want to kind of show us up, can you roll the video of us up at Stagecoach, please? With the sound, if possible. Otherwise, Steve can just talk us through it. Welcome to Stagecoach Vineyard. I'm Steve Ryan, and I am here in the vineyard with our crew. Steve, you want to take over?
Yeah, I don't think the sound's on the video, but basically what's happening here is that I'm in this really attractive hat and vest combination, and we're at Stagecoach Vineyard, high up at altitude, about 1,500 foot elevation, and we're looking at our Cab Franc there, and you see that it's hand harvested. The guys, you see them crouching down. It's a very labor-intensive roll. You see them dropping leaves. The first pass they come through, they drop leaves, and then they come through and pick the clusters. And they're using basically either clippers or like a turf knife. If you've ever rolled sod before, there's like a little knife that you use to cut the sod, and they'll have one of those. And they basically collect it into these small little bins, colloquially known as YFDs, and then we go ahead and they dump it into what's called a macro bin. So the macro bin is a half-ton bin that we truck the grapes to the winery. So that was a little cumbersome, and I apologize for that too. But and also, folks, the fact that we skipped right over the fact that we picked grapes to make harvest happen, I would actually say that it's harvest, and we got a little harvest rain. It's been a very intense month with a lot of fruit coming in. We're booked out for the Anarchist brand, so it's long days, long nights, all of that. Stu, what's up, my brother?
And the funny thing is, I know I look like I'm in my mid-50s, but I'm only 23 years old. It's just during harvest that I get all these road miles on me. Hey, Steve, thanks for kind of walking us through that. It is amazing. So, and we picked those grapes, which Steve was saying, like, we're often at the vineyard at 4 o'clock in the morning. So we're going to do a morning pick. So it's cold out. As you know, most of us who know the Bay Area, fog rolls in, temperatures are really cold. And what that does is when we're harvesting in the morning, it prevents a possibility of the grapes will start fermenting on their own, a spontaneous fermentation. So we get them here to the winery before the fog lifts, and they're safe because the vines are kind of dormant at nighttime, kind of a mini dormancy, not like they are in the winter. And so we can kind of take action before the natural yeast kind of kicks in. Then they get sorted. And then for Rosé Against the Machine, for Anarchist, what we do is we're going to put them in the press. And we have a really cool video of the press. If Sharath, you kind of want to launch this, and I'll kind of walk through the process. So as what's going to happen is, Steve, it's tank 11, by the way. When those grapes come in, they go directly as whole clusters in this hopper above behind us. And then when those grapes go in there, we have a balloon in effect that will start to inflate. In some of this footage, you'll see little slats. And those little slats are when that balloon inflates, it releases the water or the sugar water from the grapes, and it falls through those slats into a trough. And then what we're going to do is take that juice and ferment it. But this bladder isn't, we just don't crank it up. We have a computer on here, and we inflate it at 0.2 bars of an interval. You know what a bar is. If you remember from high school science, basically, each bar is 1 atmosphere, a barometric reading, and that's about 14.5 pounds. It is 14.5 pounds per square inch. So we inflate that bladder at 0.2 bars, and then that releases some juice. And then we're tasting that juice. And then we're getting, I get these flavors. I'm getting like a 1986 Mazda. I'm getting a little bit of Sandra Bullock. And then we inflate it at 0.4 bars, 0.6 bars. So we don't want to turn it all the way up to like 1.2, 1.4, because we're really vigilant about breaking seeds. Seeds release a lot of bitter phenolics, a lot of bitter flavors into the wine, and we don't want to release those flavors. So we're tasting all the time. Once it's done pressing, we're going to rack that wine. We're going to move it into a tank where we're going to prepare it for fermentation. And so for red wines, they get sorted, they get prepared for fermentation, they go in the tank. White wines, they go into the press. That resulting juice goes into a tank to be prepared for fermentation. And then Fernando, you want to say hi on camera here, man? Come on then. So Fernando, our amazing Fernando, they've been working together for many years, making things happen during harvest. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
And then Steve's going to kind of walk us through fermentation. Steve, you want to take over and kind of walk us through and take us through the fermentation process?
Yeah. Thank you, Susan. Once we get into tank, and I'm over at tank 29 now, not tank 11. But unless I was supposed to do something at tank 11 and I missed it, I don't know.
You're okay, man.
Fermentation is, to really break it down, the easiest way to understand it is that yeast, which is all around us and is naturally on all of the grapes, it's naturally in the air here at the winery, and but we also can inoculate it with the cultured strain of yeast. Yeast eats sugar and gives you alcohol and CO2. One of the things that also happens that's very little, not talked about very often, is that yeast will, or the fermentation process also creates chemical pathways that basically give you like something called higher alcohols and higher acids. And
Philip, you're gonna have to pick up the camera.
Esters. And those esters are very arid fermentation. Okay. Okay, we got it. Thank you, folks. Philip should put Stu on mute now too. Are aromatic compounds that are formed in fermentation. They're also flavors. And so the temperature of what we ferment things at is really where you're going to send something down a specific biochemical pathway. Certain yeasts will have certain byproducts and will give you certain flavors by and large, but also the temperatures you do will control that. So right now I'm at tank 29. This is a tank of Cabernet Sauvignon. This is going to be the foundation of our 2020 The Philosopher. So this won't be released until probably 3 years from now. But and I already sprayed it with alcohol before the camera was on, so I'm a good boy. But this right now is down to, the measurement of sugar is down at 0.2 bricks. So that translates roughly to probably about 3 grams of sugar, 3.5 grams of sugar for the whole bottle of wine that you would drink. And we'll go again down to like -1.5, -1.8, -2, somewhere in there, so that it gets really, really dry. And the temperature on this right now, you can see right here. So this is a module called TankNet. And TankNet is, what's super cool about this, and we geek out on it a little bit, is that our director of winemaking, Patrick Sabo, can literally be sitting on the couch in his underwear, or hopefully like sweatpants and a t-shirt or something like that. And he can get online and he can change the temperature of this tank remotely. He can also, I don't know, Teresa, if you can, it might be easier to hand me I don't know if it'll show very well down here, but underneath the tank here, you see there's a pump there. And so trying to see if it looks good there. There's a pump right under the tank, and that is for what we call pump overs. We're going to talk about punch downs and pump overs in a second, because Stu's doing a punch down on your screen, I believe. But this will automate the process. And so the important part about that is that Patrick can do all of this remotely. And again, it's an efficiency thing, and it's a scientific thing, and that if he wants this, so this is set at 80 degrees. It's right now at 80.2. If it gets up to 80.5, the cooling will kick on and bring it back down to 80. And so that's just a little bit of the precision that we work with here. So Stu, you are at a bin over there, and I know it's hard to talk while you are punching down. So Teresa, do you mind taking me off video? Everybody can watch Stu for a sec to leave my audio on, so I can talk through what Stu's doing. Oh, Stu, you want to talk?
So So hey, Philip, I don't know if you can kind of get around the top of this bin. And what I did, I just finished up the punch down on this red, and you can, what Steve was talking about was when during the fermentation process is that carbon dioxide, which is produced when the yeast is eating sugar. So imagine that the yeast is a Pac-Man eating the sugar. And what happens is those two byproducts are alcohol, which you are all celebrating with at home, and carbon dioxide. And when that CO2 is produced, that gas pushes the skins to the top. Now, the problem is that all of our color and flavor is in those skins. And so what we do is this thing called a punch down, or Steve was just kind of talking about the automated pump overs where it pulls the juice from the bottom and it trickles through those skins. So when Philip was panning around the side, you saw how it went down about 4 inches. And then in a matter of 2 hours, this will be back up 3-4 inches. And under here, it's toasty. You know, it's about 29 degrees C right now. And so it's, you know, the fermentation is kind of kicking in. You can actually see when we move it around, the CO2 kind of coming back up to the surface. And it's definitely a grape stainer, but that's why we have to mix it up is, number one, submerge those skins in there, get that color extraction, and it blows off some of the heat. And also it introduces a little bit of oxygen into that ferment. So that's punch downs. And we're going to do that, you know, like if you remember back to those Ernest and Julio Gallo commercials from the early 80s, it'd be like, we will sell no wine before it's time. And Orson Welles kind of made it seem like it takes years and years for these wines to ferment. It takes 5 days, 6 days. And so we have to really be vigilant and do our punch downs accordingly to make sure, because we're only getting color and flavor extraction for a few of those days. And so at the height of fermentation like it is right now, that's when we're trying to get these colors and these flavors extracted. And then what's going to happen in our next episode, all these, we're going to drain off this juice at the bottom, and that's called free run juice. And then we're going to put the skins into the press and gently squeeze them. And since all of our color and flavors in the skin, 0.2 bars, 0.4 bars, each little squeeze will introduce new flavors, new textures into the resulting wine. So thanks, Steve. I just want to thank you for doing a really good job on fermentation, because it's really hard to just kind of describe these biochemical reactions which are taking place and why we have to be time sensitive with each of these punch downs and pump overs. And as you know, we make many wines here at the winery, and you know we just get a fraction of them that we get to experience for Anarchist. But you saw the foundation of the cab over there, and this is going to be part of the conspiracy theory. So fantastic, Steve. I'm going to pass it over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Stu. So the pump over, so just to give a little more background, Stu was in front of what we call a super T, which is a bin, plastic bin that will hold, total capacity will be 1.5 tons. To get a really good ferment on it, you should keep it probably about 1.25 tons of grapes in there. So we use those bins for really smaller ferments. So as you know, with the Anarchist Wine Co., we play with a lot of different varietals. And so some of the bigger varietals we'll have in tank, and then other things that are a little more fun and experimental that we just want to use as blenders and to give just a little bit of a kiss in the bottle. We go ahead and do those in smaller lots. And so that's what he was doing. And all of the tanks, and there are two types of tanks. There are what we call closed top tanks and open top tanks. And Teresa, actually, if you wouldn't mind backing up here, I know I'm going to do the thing I said I wouldn't do, which is move while on screen. But this right here is an open top tank. So you can see there's no lid on the tank. And then behind it, we have our cubic tanks, which are closed. And so you can see there's a lid on there. The difference being that for some varieties, Pinot Noir, Syrah predominantly, sometimes Grenache, more Ved, Rhone varieties in general, winemakers will prefer to have an open top tank because they may want to dump some of the grapes in still on the stems. And they feel that the stem tannin, there's tannins in the stems, not only just the skin and seeds, as Stu mentioned, but they'll want to kind of get a little bit of that flavor and herbaceousness from the stems. So that we can dump into these, meaning we can take a forklift and dump the whole bin of grapes, the half-ton macro that I mentioned earlier, into the tank. In the closed top tanks, that's where we pump the must in. It's all been destemmed. It's all gone through the optical sorter. We pump it in. And then the equivalent of Stu standing there with the paddle, punching down the, doing the punch down on the T-bin, super T, is the tank will go ahead and auto circulate itself. It'll pull juice on the bottom from that pump that I showed you down below. And then there's an irrigation arm on the top of the tank that does it. And so it can all be basically in a closed system. And that's where you're going to get that with a lot of other varieties, especially Cabernet Sauvignon. That's why that tank was the one that we pulled this 2020 Philosopher off of. So are there any questions? I'm gonna ask my trusty mate here to see if there's any questions coming in. And oh, it does. Stu, actually, it looks like we do have, do you mind if I just see that for 1 second, just so I can read it? Awesome, thank you. Sam in Phoenix is asking, is asking if we're doing an orange wine this year, or if that process is any different.
So Sam, really good question with the orange wine. So the moral of the story is a rosé against the machine, is a white wine with red grapes. So what we do is the grapes are harvested, and then we bring them and we put them right in the press. An orange wine is there's not a lot of agreement on the name of that actually style, but what they do is you make a red wine with white grapes. So in effect, you know how I was punching down here, what we would do is we'd be punching down white grapes and extracting tannins from the skins of white grapes. And this is the first year that we're going to be skipping the orange wine. And we use the Gewürztraminer, but we ran into a problem with something called sales, where we've been selling so much Gewürztraminer that we didn't have enough for the orange wine. But we're going to be resuming the process again with the next vintage, and we look forward to doing that. We love Gewürz, and we love skin fermented white. Steve?
Yeah, I'm going to say that sales are usually not a problem, but I do appreciate that our head of sales thinks that sales are a problem. Are you saying something? I hear you yammering over there, but I can't hear you.
No, I said that we had too much Gewürztraminer moved, and so we didn't have enough for the orange wine. Exactly.
So anyhow, so that's essentially gets you up to speed of what's happening right now. So in the winery right now, we've got about another 100 tons coming in, not for the Anarchist brand. We've got a lot of, we've got some Zinfandel coming up from Paso Robles. That'll be for the conspiracy theory. That comes in on Tuesday, I think. But other than that, we make wine for a number of other folks as well. And so we've got about another 100 tons or so coming in. And it's an early harvest. We had a few big heat events, and the flavors were really looking good. So we picked, and we were fortunate with the smoke that we picked from a wine standpoint, and being able to have something to make this year. However, we're going to be back in a few weeks. We're going to take you through another couple of steps of the process, and we'll get into what happens post-pressing once we get into barrel. We'll talk all about that stuff. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them out. We are going to stop the recording here in a few minutes. Excuse me. The doors are open here, and we got some yellow jackets flying through here and there because of the grapes. But we will be back on October 22nd for the second installment of Inquisitive Sips. Things will be a little bit more under control, I think, as far as the days that we leading into it. So hopefully we'll keep things on track for you a little bit more. I'm speaking of myself more than Stu. I ran over from the meeting just right before this. So I would say support local wineries, support Napa and Sonoma, keep us in your thoughts. And we've got a few other things coming up. Stu, I think you have a book club coming up on October 21st. Is that correct?
I think I might be muted right now, but if I'm not, October 22nd, Wednesday night, the Reading Between the Wines book club. If you guys are available and interested, Reading Between the Vines, we're going to be doing The Botanist and the Vintner, which is about kind of a something called phylloxera, a root louse, which ravaged the wine industry, and then in the late 1860s and 70s. And then it hit us here in Napa in the 90s. So kind of an interesting look at a new thing for the book group.
And then for those that follow Wine Foundry Wednesdays, we will be back on October 14th for our next installment of that. And that'll take you through a bit more of harvest. So please feel free to join. Our wine club is shipping out October 12th. The week of the 12th, and so you still have another 2 weeks, week and a half or so to join the wine club if you'd like. And other than that, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and you can see everything that's going on. Teresa runs our social media, and she's posting a lot of great stuff about harvest and all of the activities and all of that. And if you have any questions along the way, shoot a note to taste@anarchistwineco.com or orders@anarchistwineco.com. We'll be happy to answer anything you need. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. Cheers and be well.